My name is Natalie Cronin. Here's my student ID. I will present formal and informal assessments for my midterm. What are assessments? Assessment, as defined in our textbook, is the process of gathering information to monitor progress and make educational decisions if necessary. So it's not enough to present the curriculum as a teacher. A teacher must assess students to understand how they are learning, if they are learning, and how a teacher might change their strategies to meet their students' needs. Teachers use assessments, both formal and informal, to place students, to see how their students are learning throughout the process of instruction, and also to see if there are interventions necessary because a student may not be meeting certain criteria or objectives that we set forth within the curriculum. It's an integral part of the response to intervention model. Without assessments, that model simply doesn't work because it's an ongoing process of seeing how students are learning and how we can change strategies of instruction to meet their needs. So one of the articles I found that talks about mainly formative and summative assessment, but really states how assessment is a critical component of effective teaching and learning. The relationship of curriculum, assessment, and instruction must be integrated and reciprocal. So first we're going to talk about formal assessments. Formal assessments are typically standardized tests. We know these, such as an SAT test or California achievement tests. They are very data-driven. They compare students against other students of the same age or grade level. You might have the percent where they're compared in a percentile. Their performance is compared. They also may be compared against certain criteria. So those would be your criterion referenced exams or tests. There's a very strict method of administration for a formal test. It's often scripted, so every teacher that administers the test would say the exact same thing. So it creates reliability and validity. And every test taker has the same procedures themselves for taking the test. So some pros of formal assessments. You can access a lot of data from formal assessments. They provide information that allow you to compare students or compare students against criteria so you can see if they've met an objective or have learned a certain item or certain items. They're proven to be valid and reliable because they are research-based, so they're field tested with a diverse sample group of students. So theoretically, they should meet the needs of every type of student, every ability of student within the norming group or sample group that has tested the measurement. It can show if learning has occurred, and it can assess achievement, and they're fairly easy to administer because the directions are right in the manual, although it's advisable for it to really be valid and reliable that a teacher is very familiar with the exam before administering it. Some cons of formal assessments. They're really only a snapshot of time when that student is actually taking the exam. And so their mood and other extenuating circumstances could impact the student performance, such as anxiety, hunger, mood, poor testing environment, and things such as that. a lot of these tests are multiple choice tests, so you don't adequately see learning across different contexts. So there's no application of learning in different ways. It's simply, do they know the information, kind of yes or no, or sometimes you can even guess in a way on a multiple choice test by narrowing down. If you're not really sure of the answer, you can usually narrow down and get it pretty close, so that's not really measuring, how you know that knowledge in some cases. The administration is easy, but you need to follow it exactly in order to preserve the validity and the reliability of the measure. Often these types of tests are used for high stakes decisions about schools and performance of schools and funding for schools. So that is often seen as a con. And it's only one way to show understanding and mastery of the concepts. So informal assessments are non-standardized methods, and they can include anything from observations, teacher-made tests, portfolios, simple questioning that a teacher might do, exit tickets, quick quizzes, pop quizzes, a lot, like mainly the items that teachers use day to day in the classroom would be your informal type of assessments. And many of these, or most of these, are formative measures, so that they're really impacting instruction. If they're being used appropriately, you're really able to see a picture of what the students are learning and how they're learning in real time. So it really allows teachers to adjust their instruction, see which instruction may be working for some students, which students might need a different type of instruction, that kind of thing. So pros of informal assessments: that they're flexible, they're dynamic, they're continuous, they measure progress, and in our textbook, they talk about how teachers can check student progress using a variety of informal methods, such as teacher-made tests, checklists, and curriculum-based measurement, or CBM. And CBM, curriculum-based measurement, is a method of monitoring instruction regularly, which is extremely important for the response to intervention model, because you really want to see that those interventions are working and be checking in with those kids periodically that are getting interventions. And really just your typical students you need to check in with them and make sure that your instruction is meeting their needs. And the only way to do that is frequently, assessing what they're doing and what they're learning. So it can guide and direct instruction, ongoing. It improves teaching and learning. And it can also be used to diagnose student difficulties. Some of the cons are they're not data driven, so you as a teacher really have to plot the data and gather that information. So it's not a real easy way to kind of take a look at what's happening. You have to grade the tests, plot the data, plot the progress being made, and compare it to past progress to really kind of see what's happening and see where adjustments need to be made. They're not as reliable or as valid because they're not norm referenced, they're not standardized, they could be subjective, and it does take work from a teacher to create, administer, and keep track of the information. So in conclusion, it is important to remember that both formal and informal assessments have their place in educational decision making. So one of the things we've learned in our text is that you can't just use a IQ test to make decisions about a student's eligibility for special education services. So using both types of assessments can and should be used to inform instruction as well as plan for what students need, whether it be special education services or just simply intervention services, so that they can meet the standards that are set forth by the curriculum. So educators can only determine if instruction is effective by regularly checking the progress of their students.